Once in the Mirror. Chapter 36. Changing Tack. Terry was invited, shortly after the collapse of the job at Times newspapers, to be the new reproduction manager. This he was pleased to accept. Terry had to inform the Star what was to take place, and when he told the union representative, who was a well-known activist, what was about to happen, he said he would bring out all the workers if he accepted. He knew Terry was fully aware of the method by which jobs were weighted with extra hours to conform to the speed of the slowest worker. With that, he went down to the works manager and told him what the union representative said, confirming yet again that he would still take on the job if he was backed. He could see that it was a hopeless situation, that the management was stuck with the existing working arrangements. He took on the job himself, asking Terry to help whenever he had a problem, which he was pleased to do. And during this stage in his career, it was beneficial to be working for such an innovative firm. Their policy was to promote the latest technology. By working there, Terry was to keep abreast of the latest techniques coming onto the market. The new Vario Klishograph was installed, the second to be brought into the country. It was our good fortune that we had an employer technically skilled and sympathetically minded to see its potential. The firm allowed the men to be trained one at a time, and this training quickly opened their eyes to its market value. This continued until a second scanner was purchased, both then linked into the production line, and both allocated a permanent operator. The firm was far in advance of the most other printers, and this technical expertise used as a marketing policy to bring in work from outside. The gambit was that here was a system that did away with fabricated variables. Managements were able to try to find new ways that would eliminate workers altogether, and for this panacea they would stand almost any cost. The firm still existed on overtime, not just to keep production in line with their customers' needs, but also to satisfy the workers, to allow their workers to earn more money without a basic salary increase, which would further push up prices. Terry was not alone in taking advantage of this facility, though out of the years of employment he was used to the overtime payment, which became indispensable, allowing the family to maintain a certain standard. Edward Heath won the election for the Conservative Party in 1970. The following June, Simon was faced with the 11 Plus exam. There had been profound changes in educational policies ever since the 1944 Education Act. Sociologists, psychologists and educationists were against this diverse split needed for grammar education, believing that the comprehensive ideals should be encouraged and promoted by local authorities. At that time, Harrow Council continued with their existing secondary education policy, which included grammar schools, and this state of affairs only lasted another 3 years. Terry and Sally had no fear that Simon wouldn't pass, nor did his teachers. His name had been entered onto the list to attend Harrow Grammar School on passing the exam. It was a certainty that there was an initial social bias that became progressively clear, and by this method of selecting children. Many of the children's parents had a professional background. A pro-comprehensive voice was raised against grammar schools, but many of the more vocal raised their voices in protest, wishing to retain the system. Some local education authorities started a comprehensive form of education well before. In the mid-60s, there were about 200 comprehensives. 10 years later, there were 2,000, taking 60% of the pupils, and by 1980, 90% was reached. Unfortunately, not enough money was put into the scheme to guarantee a sound footing. Harrow Borough elected to stop grammar selection in 1973. It became a disaster. The fine outstanding schools lost their premier position and now are becoming discipline-free mediocrities. Gradually, teenage clubs and associations faltered. Television undermined the good work such bodies had encouraged. More younger married women with children went out to work. Socially liberal forms of behaviour promoted by parents mistakenly believing to allow the full development of the child. It was the time of the swinging 60s. There was a growing prosperity for all ages and classes. The Beatles became the top group exploiting the Mersey beat, still vaunted as a unique sound, their brashness eclipsing a far higher aestheticism. The far more legislation was the Ministry of Social Security Act, which sought to replace national assistance by supplementary benefits. The new benefits depended on a means test. Councils began to make a conscious effort to increase conservation and control the numbers of high-rise flat developments. Trades union unrest, trying to maintain the cost of living for their members, lost more workdays than their European competitors. It was unfortunate that Terry didn't get the job with Times newspapers to set up a new colour reproduction department, for that would have been quite a challenge. Nationally, the printing trade suffered a loss of standing by the closure of outdated printing works, the public thinking the industry faltering, not understanding that to re-equip a modern printing works, the old machinery has to be removed first, which was no simple undertaking. The industrial recession in the middle of the decade went on to the extent that even those firms known to be productive and progressives were losing work. The union's short-sighted views about the effects the new technology was going to cause to future industrial relations limited the speed industry was to take to climb out of the mess. This is not a criticism, but a description of the way unions work. They operate on a day-to-day basis, especially when unemployment and unrest was threatening. They have no option but to pander to the cry for work. School fees and extracurricular activities were stretching Terry's finances, a drain to continue for many years. He had to devise a plan to cushion this insecurity, lessen the effects of industrial disputes. Sally was now working part-time, and some of her money was finding its way back into the kitty. It was not enough in times of hardship to hold the fort, though. She objected to her earnings being used for household bills, wanting to spend it all on what she chose. That week there was an advertisement in the Daily Mail. Throughout its life, the Daily Mail has set aside a special advertisement section for printing vacancies. For a lecturer grade 2 in the graphic reproduction department of the London College of Printing. This, Terry thought, would be the answer to the fluctuating industry. He sent away for the application form and received back a letter setting out a list of duties and an application form. And this he duly signed, dated and posted to receive back a letter giving time and date for an interview for that April. This coincided with the family's Easter holiday at the YMCA. Terry caught a train from Eastbourne to London, suit packed and shoes cleaned. As an apprentice, he had attended the London School of Printing at Bolt Court, not far from Dr. Johnson's house and the City Literary Institute, just off Fleet Street. The school moved to the Elephant Castle with a new title, becoming the College of Printing. The first year's trades and design courses were installed in Waterloo's old building in Back Hill, Clerkenwell. Now Terry was attending the college again, only this time to teach. When he emerged from the tube station, the college tower block presented its towering floors directly opposite. Its partly shrouded exterior, blurred by polluted light, resembled a Victorian engraving, a forbidding picture, its ground floor's windows shaded by roller blinds, giving a backcloth to numerous student posters, the effect being to simulate a post-revolutionary military headquarters. This structure, forever circled by a dizzy gyration of never-ending traffic, hooting, screeching, and thundering out an intimidating, pulsating roar. Never was there more depressing sight. Gone the newspaper printing houses, cafes and coffee shops that over the centuries contributed to the nation's nation's printing heritage. Here was a building of the 60s with all its non-architectural skills blatantly obvious, that bleak carbuncle period in architectural design. Terry was there to try to protect his future, to give it his best shot. The pay just allowed him to survive with the help from Sally's salary. The holidays would give him a chance to be at home with the children, which was an enormous plus. Terry knew a handful of lecturers, two who had actually taught him all those years before. The position was one that Terry was filling. As the manager in a progressive company which had the latest equipment, he felt capable of holding his own. The company had employed ex-letterpress men to train, so he was versed in the art of passing on skills and theory. During the interview there was a pregnant pause, as the chairman told him that whatever happened they couldn't possibly offer him the position advertised. They felt it only right that they should grant that position to somebody who was already a member of staff. They were kind enough to say that the advertisement held the wrong wording. It was now for a vacant position at a lower grade. There was no more than 3 applicants, none with his qualifications. Terry was asked by the chairman of the selection board would he agree in the event of being offered the job to undergo teacher training, a new government measure to protect teaching standards, that all lecturers in further education and higher education were to need a teaching certificate. After the interview, Terry caught a train back to Eastbourne to complete his holiday. He was excited, imagining the effect his news was going to have when Sally was told. A few weeks later a letter arrived, which informed him that he had been accepted. Now that Sally was working full-time, did have a bearing on his decision to accept a post which paid less money. Teaching would provide stability and security, enabling him to look after the home while Sally was at work. This was a great advantage, fully compensating them for the lower salary. Lithography was at its apex, taking over much of the general print work from letterpress and gravure. Those departments were losing teaching hours to the new working methods. They extended their teaching practices into other courses. This practice was accepted throughout the college to keep on to the staff. Departmental heads made sure new courses contained an element of those skills they taught. If there was a new method, their staff attended those lessons, and eventually the new skills were picked up to teach first-year students. Over a period, the skills became adopted and accepted as the department's own, and by this method an out-of-date section or department built up its teaching hours. Department heads applauded staff who designed courses that enticed students to their department in college, particularly high-level courses. This increased the status of the college, school and department. College authorities eagerly sought all courses that catered for overseas students. Their upfront fees paid for themselves and others too. The college authorities are not concerned that those students may be better off under another establishment's course. It's about cash, student numbers and status. The college enrolling week was like a battlefield, with clapped-out teachers exhausted, having to act as salespeople and promotions experts, the winners strutting around excitedly showing off a full list of prospective students. How much better, they cried, to start a continuation course of 3 years, which ensured a full teaching program. Once they have a list of over 16 students, they could start the course, even if they hadn't paid. The teachers will hope to get the cheque from the students on the first lesson attended, and even then the student may say that the employer didn't pay up, but would the following week, or some other excuse. It sometimes took weeks to get the money. The college authorities found it difficult to stop the class if some of the students had already paid their fees and the class was several weeks into the course. There was a cut-off point of 11 places taken and paid for, which allowed the class to continue for a year's tuition. By the end of the course, there may be only 5 students left out of perhaps 4 times that number at the beginning. These annual enrollment days were all part of the system that Terry had to become accustomed to. When his first term was completed, he was co-opted by the head of department to help mark the exam papers, total up the end-of-year results, and make out the reports. Here was another insight into the new world he was destined for. The philosophy was, try not to fail anyone, for that was detrimental to the student's well-being and self-worth. It might also mean the class didn't have enough numbers to make it economic. Being generous might make excellent psychology if some effort were made by the students to conform and study. In many cases they didn't. Some just entered their names at the top of the paper, and very little else. Terry's knowledge of statistics, averages and bell-shaped curves, spreads, graphs, means and norms suddenly escalated. How to describe a student's efforts without being abusive or using the same hackneyed could have done better by having a marking script suitable for all scores and yearly comments. Common room gossip abounded, the hierarchical place settings of desks and lockers, deferences given to old established members, not necessarily length of neither service nor status, but a hidden unspoken position commanding respect, usually by a published work. The National Association of Teachers in Further and Higher Education represented the staff, who were just as rigorously as the Society of Lithography Artists and Designers and Process Workers, and the National Geographical Association or National Society of Operative Printers, Geographical and Media, were in the trade. Terry was not escaping the influence of the unions at all. Here they all were, the same effusive socialist thinkers, just a union name change. All the alterations in working practices and changes in the labour market were just as apparent. Teachers knew the public's disquiet over long holidays. It was no good explaining about gathering in the harvest. What an outdated reason for establishing a course length. Education establishments are huge structures on massive land sites, requiring enormous sums of money to keep open. Having them empty, even for a limited period, was a total waste of taxpayers' money. Staggered holidays, flexible working, shorter work courses, instruction in the workplace, teaching by internet, legitimate ways to reduce costs. Terry began to study by first building a desk and shelving in the bedroom, a dining room chair and some course books, a second-hand dictionary, and the necessary papers and pens made up the equipment to make a start. A day-release course at Garnet College for teacher training, learning about the secrets of educational history, sociology, psychology and philosophy in normal circumstances could be quite interesting and challenging, but having a crowded house with 6 children to try and attend to all the exams and the essays was an almost impossible task. The class at Garnet was made up of similar workers, individuals not long out of catering establishments, building works, printers, nursing and secretarial offices. It was quite good fun, relearning a lot of forgotten facts. Just needed time. Shortly his first essay was completed. He asked Sally if she would kindly type it up. "It gives me a headache," she said. "I've no idea what it's about, and I don't want to." He knew he wasn't making a very good job of it either, so he wouldn't try that again. With that rather negative start, he looked around for a typewriter and found one through the Harrow Lions Club, offered for £10. Now he had the means to type up his own essays, and from that moment on his life changed. Every evening that little machine clattered away, initially turning out terrible rubbish and finally something more reasonable. It also coped with setting out his lectures and notes. His first essay drew from his tutor, Ray Harmon, the criticism convoluted, and his last, a good effort. Each, Terry believed, generous and kind. What was more to the point, he was learning and enjoying it, and could recognize the difference it was making. All this furious banging away at the typewriter was eroding what little time he had with his children. Still, there were the holidays. The thought kept him going when he actually enjoyed the discipline. At the same time he was banging away in his garret, he enrolled for a technical certificate in printing techniques, thinking that this would be another means of procuring a further step up the next rung on the ladder, something else to fill his curricula vitae and show keenness. This quest for qualifications caused endless worry and took a great deal of time.